All right, guys, we're not in our normal studio today. We're actually in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, at the Museum of the Bible. I'm here for my book launch, A Mission Without Borders, and the Green family, who the founders of the Museum of the Bible, have just been so gracious to let us use the museum for our set. And if you've never been to the Museum of the Bible, 450,000 square feet, just incredible archaeology of the Bible and the history of the Bible. It's absolutely incredible. It's worth a visit to Washington, D.C. just to come and bring your family here. Today, we're going to talk about something that's not the norm for the Resilient Show. We talk about UFOs and secret technologies and government black programs and who's hiding all of it. A lot of people might ask, well, like, why we're doing that type of show in the Resilient Show. And I want to do more and more of this kind of stuff because I believe that our audience needs to be informed, because being informed means being ready, and being ready means being resilient, and the show's about being resilient. You have to have good information. So in order to do that, I want to bring in the best experts I can in every field to showcase that. And so today we're going to be talking to UFOologist Dr. Stephen Greer, who is widely known as one of the world's foremost authorities on the subject of UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence, and technologies in initiating peaceful contact with interstellar civilizations. One of the things that I want to say as a note up front is, as soon as someone typically hears like UFO expert, people tend to backpedal or extraterrestrials and think a conspiracy theorist or maybe a crazy person. But with Dr. Greer, that's definitely the opposite. He is a retired medical physician and the founder of the Center for Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Disclosure Project, which seeks to disclose alleged classified UFO information to the public. He has become known and respected for providing evidence-based disclosures of both UFOs and advanced technologies for 35 years. He's briefed directors of the CIA, DIA, top-ranking officials in the Pentagon, and every president since Bill Clinton on the topic of UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence and technologies, and secret black fund programs that operate in the shadows of our government. Dr. Greer's written 5 books on the subject and produced 5 documentaries, which have been seen by approximately 800 million people worldwide on many networks, to include the Discovery Channel and the History Channel. His latest documentary, The Lost Century, I just saw it. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And so today, I'm super excited, personally, for myself and for you guys, to introduce Dr. Stephen Greer to the show. Thank you for being here.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you. Great spot.
Absolutely. Was that introduction accurate? Or
pretty good, except I'm not a ufologist. I'm
Okay.
a trauma doctor, and there's no such thing as ufology because there's no such thing as a UFO. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
It's a psyop word that was concocted by the agency to gaslight people. So I'm going to start out hard and a little bit aggressive here.
Perfect.
99% of everything on this subject has been curated disinformation to deceive not only the media and the public, but particularly our national leaders who have ever tried to look into this. And so as a young doctor, I discovered that was going on because, and if you can imagine being in your mid-30s, being asked to brief the sitting director of the CIA on this subject because he and the president at that time, Clinton, were being denied access and information on it. And I had information on it. So this is an upside down city right here on this issue.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that, the management of this is not only unconstitutional, but I'll put it on the table, has been treasonous and involving very serious crimes. So I left my medical career to fix that. So now, to clarify the definition, what they call a UAP now, which is the flavor du jour of the PSYOPs, psychological warfare teams out of the counterintelligence operations, they're not unidentified, and they're not aerial, and they're not a phenomenon. A UAP, that word would connote that it's something we don't know what it is, and we do know what they are. So there are basically 2 major, and then there's a subcategory of objects people see, including our flyboys or military pilots. First would be genuine extraterrestrial vehicles, or NHI, non-human intelligence operated craft. Absolutely true. Those are a minority. The majority of them are in fact ours. Now, my uncle helped design the lunar module that put the first man on the moon, the thing that landed with Neil Armstrong, Northrop Grumman. And Northrop Grumman, as well as the Lockheed Skunk Works, Raytheon, and a few other prime covert contractors, have these objects flying around that are ours. So I told David Fravor, who was the pilot who chased the object off the coast of California back, I believe it was 2004, that they brought out. I said, he was convinced that was alien. I said, yeah, well, it may have been based on studying extraterrestrial tech, but it's ours. It came out of the Lockheed Skunk Works. And I have documents in our archive. We've just released what's called the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. You can put a link in here, and it's terabytes of data. Everything I've put together in 34 years, we've just released to the public.
Oh, so it is released now?
Everything.
Okay.
Well, there are certain things redacted. We'll get into why and what that is. What the problem is that everyone's is stuck in the 1960s on this subject, including Capitol Hill over here, where I go up and meet with members of Congress. They're still trying to get their mind around just basic, what is this? When that's been asked and answered for a long time by the evidence we have. So the other category of things that are called alien are not extraterrestrial, but they're extra dimensional. They come out of other dimensions that are denser, finer. It depends on how you look at it. And that gets into some complicated physics. Well, what's happened is all those things, extraterrestrial vehicles and civilizations, man-made craft, which is the predominant phenomenon seen, by the way, and this extra dimensional aspect, which is weird stuff like a ghost or something, right? They all get thrown into the same wastebasket. And it's done deliberately to obfuscate and provide confusion instead of clarity. So I feel like what my job has been is to try to bring some clarity to a very complicated subject. But, I founded the Global Disclosure Project in 93. It was called Project Starlight. It was a code word name that Spook, Intel guy, made up for us prior to briefing the director of the CIA. And it's now become the Global Disclosure Project. But the problem with it is that the subject is actually very, very complex.
Yeah.
And to unpack it, which I hope we can do in the next couple hours, it takes a little bit of patience. But what I've tried to do is put the information out that provides the evidence to back up the assessments, right? So an intelligence assessment, as you know, is more difficult than just gathering data. So my primary job has been, all the way back to when I was a young doctor, briefing the CIA director, is not only to put the evidence together, but try to create some sound out of that noise, all that information. What does it mean? Why are they here? How is this being managed? What's the architecture of this extreme deep state, deep national security state? And what is the agenda of that? I mean, these are the big issues. The data and the evidence is now on the internet for anyone on your show to see. It's for free.
Right.
You have to register just because we got attacked by 10,000 bots the day we launched this a couple months ago. But bot farms that were, I'm sure, sent by Intel services around the world. Because what's in there is mind-blowing. It's actually if you were to hold hearings here in Washington for a whole year from 9 to 5 in the House Oversight Committee, where I've been doing meetings, you wouldn't get 1% of what's now sitting out there for the public to see. Yeah. And it includes 760 witnesses and military government whistleblowers summarized in there, and 115 of them, you can see their whole testimony, right? You can see all of it. We have 122 documented crash retrieval cases where we have downed the ET craft and gotten them with people named who are on the retrieval team.
This is UFO crashes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the extraterrestrial ones. There are man-made UFO crashes.
But these are 122 extraterrestrial ones.
Yes. It's all there for anyone to look at it. Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. Yeah.
The Disclosure Project, 100 plus years of advanced technologies has been seized by the government, isolated and hidden and suppressed. And by the way, this can be used for the advancement of human technology and progress. So what your project does is it archives the things you talked about, which is from US, Canada, Russia, Australia, the UK, 145 top secret facilities.
Right. Well, it's now up to 152 or 3. We've just located several others, black sites, we call them. Most of them are DUMBs, deep underground military bases and SCIFs that are out in remote areas, but some are in urban areas. We have one in Orange County in Irvine, we know the intersection, the office building, you go down and that's where one of them are. So all this is being turned over to the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services and House Oversight. Now, whether they'll actually get anything organized, do anything about it, I don't know. But later we'll talk about some initiatives that will sort of, I think, supersede what Congress is doing.
Well, one of the things you said, and by the way, like I want to make sure the listeners are listening, the Disclosure Project, not just the 162, I think you just said, or 152 top secret facilities, but you already mentioned the numbers, but I'll say it again, 760 or so witnesses from within the government, from contractors, from military, 122, you said, UFO crashes.
All documented in there and illustrated.
And
you
so
see them.
You mentioned the government not knowing about this. So really talking about two separate governments, the official government that operates within Congress, that has presidential oversight, and then another shadow government that's happening outside of, illegally, unauthorized, outside of any oversight. And that's where the secrecy. So when people say the government's hiding UFOs from us, that's not necessarily true.
Well, actually, the government, excuse my language, couldn't find their ass in a well-lighted room.
Very true, especially this government right now.
No, it doesn't matter any of them because let me tell you a story.
Go ahead.
It illustrates it because I like things to come alive instead of abstractions.
Yeah.
There used to be a famous astronaut named Gordon Cooper. And Gordon Cooper was a hero astronaut early on. Mercury went up. And when he was out at Edwards back in the 50s, I think it was 56, there was a vehicle, a UFO, broad daylight, landed out there on a dry lake bed. We have his whole testimony, all the information. And he's one of our Disclosure Project witnesses, although God bless him, he's passed away now. Years ago, I was giving a lecture to an organization here in Washington with him.
Okay.
And it was a legal group. They helped pick a lot of the Supreme Court justices. But he pulled me aside and he said, the Secretary of Defense at that time was Cohen under Clinton. And so Cohen had contacted him and asked for everything he had, everything. And he did. And so what Cohen wanted to do, the Secretary of Defense, was find the footage because Gordon Cooper, his team went out and filmed this object that landed broad daylight and was looked at it, saw it, put it on a general's plane, flew it back to Washington. Now, that was in 1956 or 7. The Secretary of Defense of the United States, with all that actionable information, details, got back to Gordon Cooper and said, that has vanished. I don't have access to it. And Gordon Cooper was astonished. I said, I'm not. I said, I have not met a single honest flag officer or general, admiral, who is on the right side of the law and is not a criminal, who has access to this. The only people who have access to it are, by definition, people who are running amok of the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the United States. And so I said, this is how the system works. Have there been some CIA directors who've known about this? Absolutely. But they're the ones who are curated and brought up through the system, and then they lie to everyone else about it. Have there been some senators? Yes. And I know who they've been. Are there some members of the House? Yes. And those are people who are in great peril right now because of something I'll share with you later.
So who's keeping the secrets? How are they keeping the secrets? And why would they keep it secret?
Yeah. The why is an interesting one. And that was the hardest thing for me to unpack in the 1990s prior to my meetings with people. Well, what I discovered is that this is a science and technology story more than an alien, whatever, fantastical story.
Right.
And that is, imagine technologies where you can, on this table, some little space this big, you could have a device that would run your house or your car or your business, pulling energy out of what's called the 0 point or quantum vacuum. Now, these technologies have been around for decades. This is what The Lost Century, that documentary,
100 years of
100 years, and it's been around a long time. But the more refined ones also allow for motion and going up, So these technologies would completely terminate all oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, public utilities, petrodollar, all of it would go. It's $1,000 trillion. So it's about power.
$4 trillion, right?
Yes, exactly. It's way north of $1,000 trillion in assets and market cap.
Yeah.
And I'm actually talking to some big mutual funds that have $2 or $3 trillion about this coming out and how they're going to have to change their investment strategy. But this has been delayed so long that now the world is in a big problem. You have 3 billion people on the planet don't even have any way to cook their food. So they're cutting down rainforests. That's true, 3 billion.
The 0 point energy would solve that.
It would solve it instantly. And we have it.
Right.
You know, everyone's talking about, let's do a plug-in car and let's put a solar panel. I have solar panels at my farm out in Virginia. But to be honest with you, the real solution is here sitting in a black box, being kept secret by a bunch of totalitarian fascists, to be honest. Let me be blunt. And they don't care anything about their power and money is all they care about.
Everybody on the planet would have it.
Everyone would have it.
No emissions.
No emissions, no pollution, and the cost of zero. After you bought the equivalent of your heat pump, right?
Yeah.
You never have a power bill. And that's true for if you drive an F-150. I used to have a Raptor. And, that thing would have a generator that would be putting out 1,000 horsepower and would be tapping into what's called the 0 point field. And you'd never have to plug it in. You wouldn't have to ever plug it in because it's pulling energy. It's estimated that if you had a coffee mug here, the amount of energy potentially and the space in a coffee mug could easily boil off all the oceans, that much energy.
Could you give in layman's terms how the 0 point energy would work?
Yeah. A layman's term electromagnetically is that you create certain very high voltage circuits at certain frequencies. And it's the frequencies combined with the voltages, very high, millions of volts, but at very, very specific cycles per second. And sometimes using specialized materials, and it perturbs or excites that 0 point. So look at it from a little bit of physics lesson. All matter is, if you get it right down to, is energy, and equals mc squared. Mm-hmm. But if you get down to the atomic level and the subatomic, they find that all of that is fluxing in and out, the subatomic particles, quantumly, out of this ocean of energy, which has now been quantified. And by the way, in the physics journals, published articles from Dr. Casimir in the 1950s proving this. This is not some wild theory.
Sure.
It's proven. But now what's not known is that covert programs, as well as certain ingenious inventors over the years, have discovered how to tap into that energy. So when we started, the whole modern era of this UFO issue really began with the detonation of the first atomic bomb. And when that happened, the ETs came in and said, we got a planet in trouble here. But there was something else that happened that most people don't know about. When you detonate an atomic or nuclear weapon, everyone knows what an electromagnetic pulse is.
Right.
What they don't know is what the scalar waves, what Tesla described as the scalar waves that are, instead of a wave form like this, it's a point of energy that goes out straight line. So it's multiples of the speed of light. That disrupts interstellar communications and travel. That's why all those UFOs have been seen around Roswell and White Sands and all of our nuclear facilities. We have one of our top secret guys is a full bird colonel who's now passed away. We have his testimony in our archive if you want to see it, Colonel Diedrichson. And he was in charge of all the nuclear facilities in the United States, Air Force, and then eventually civilian. And he said every single one of those places have been overflown by these UFOs because of their great concern about this. And they weren't hostile, because if they were hostile, they would have terminated it. But they were very concerned. So the whole modern era of UFO issues opened with the detonation in August of 1945.
We've seen the increase.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
So what you're saying is that it's not that government or the secret government is trying to hide aliens from us. They're trying to hide the technology for greed, right?
They actually want people to believe they exist, but they're hostile. Here's the PSYOP. All right. So I'm going to talk about psychological warfare operations a lot, because I have a document in our archive from the General Bedell Smith, who was the CIA director in 1953, 2 years before I was born. I just turned 69. And this document states point blank that they're going to use the UFO issue for its psychological warfare value.
Okay.
Let's fast forward to 1985. I have a document that's been admitted to be in the possession of several people, including Dr. Jacques Vallée, from the CIA, official document. I'm still trying to get it. We'll get it. And it describes committing abductions, alien staged abductions on peasants in Brazil and Argentina for their, wait for it, psychological warfare value. So no, these criminals want people to think they're aliens, but they're there to eat us for lunch, and we need to fight them. So their long-term goal is a global totalitarian military state that they control with humans fighting aliens. That's bottom line it for you. And that's been the agenda since 1953. Now, who's doing this? There's a committee. Some people believe in the old days, Truman, Eisenhower was called MJ-12 or Majestic 12. The most recent documents I have that are legitimate from the National Reconnaissance Office, this document lists the code names and distribution list from Area 51.
Is this the MAJ project? Like a MAJ, the MAJ?
No, this is the NR. Yeah, no, it's the Majority Joint Intelligence Committee, MAGI or MAGIC.
Okay.
And the MAGI or MAGIC, who's put the committee on the end, and the Majority Joint Intelligence Group is one of the key groups, and it's incredibly deep cover. Yeah. And it's not just U.S. I mean, what you have to understand about this is that it's a global, transnational. I don't call it international. International will connote one government to another. This is transnational. So it's very deep, covert, and it's very powerful. So you not only have the kind of wealth that this organization has, but you also they have technologies that could put to shame anything that 99% of the generals at the Pentagon know about in their kit, in their hardware. And this is a big national security threat. I'm sitting here in Washington. I will tell you, an organization like that with no regard, no morals or ethics, and no regard for the law, with that kind of technology and power is an existential threat to Earth and to the United States.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, no president, and to this date, no member of Congress has had the courage to go full bore over after them. And this is why this whole matter may be taken out of the hands of the politicians fairly soon. But we could talk about that in a minute.
Well, because you have, like I said, we're talking about two separate governments, the official U.S. government and the secret government.
Right.
Who are they when say they are hiding it?
I know who. I know several members who've been part of that. I mean, George H.W. Bush was, mid-level to senior level apparatchik. The former Senator John Warner, his son is on our team. He was one.
Right.
Paul Mellon, who was Senator Warner's first wife's father of the Mellon fortune.
Right.
Helped start the CIA with Allen Dulles. He was on that group. Dick Cheney, very much so.
Yeah. A lot of them tied to oil and the petrol.
All have connections to oil, petrol. And look, when people talk about our vital national security interests in the Middle East, let me translate that for John Q. Public out here. Oil. What's over there? Date palms and camels and what?
Oil.
Well, come on. And Israel has 200-300 nuclear weapons. They can defend themselves and have. So what exactly is our vital national security interest? Is that black line of super tankers coming out of that part of the world that runs the global energy economy, period. And we don't need it.
If you introduce technology that'll eliminate that, a lot of people have everything to lose.
We have it, and we can prove it's there. Now, bringing it out, the people I know who tried to bring it out with not looking before they leap have all been assassinated.
Yeah.
I mean, flat out killed, and I'm not kidding.
Yeah. Well, you've had 3 team members killed, right? Or 3 people that
4 now.
4 now.
4.
And
I've had 3 assassination attempts. Yeah.
How are you still alive? I mean, with all this that you're exposing and doing, like.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I mean,
I have what I call a DMT.
Yeah.
A dead man trigger. So a dead man trigger is information held back in the hands of certain key people. That if something does happen to me that's terminal, it gets released to the public, and it will not be nice. I mean, it will be dispositive. Some of this is material that's very personal on the individuals, and we have it. I have people who have been with the agency who have wiretaps and tape recordings of certain people that I'm holding. So we have it. I'll just put it this way. I'm probably more trouble dead than alive.
Yeah.
Which I did that deliberately in the early 90s when I realized I had a guy from the agency who taped me for a walk on the beach in Florida. I was down there, and he said, if you're going to do this, you're a dead man walking unless you do these following things. And have never been in any of this. My dad was Navy, World War II, hand-to-hand combat in the Pacific on an amphibious landing unit. But I wasn't involved in any military or intel. I didn't know the first thing about unacknowledged special access projects. We did a documentary called Unacknowledged.
Yes.
That one had 800 million views. The others have had more. So we've had about 1.5 billion people see this information globally. Yeah.
Wow.
Just to update that. But
1.5 billion people see this.
Yeah. And we need to, because ultimately, my philosophy is we're supposed to be in a democracy. Last I checked.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Oh well, we're not.
We're supposed to. Yeah.
It's I call it the Truman Show, like that movie with Jim Carrey. It's sort of a faux democracy where I always tell people, how free are we if the media is completely corrupt and controlled by these interests? And they are.
And that's Project Mockingbird, right?
Yeah. And I have a document, not conspiracy theory. I always tell people I hate that word because it's used to slander anyone someone disagrees with or that they want to debunk. But the truth is, there are conspiracies. You ever heard of the mafia? Hello?
Yeah.
I mean, there are criminal organizations. The biggest criminal organization on planet Earth is keeping this secret, period. And they have the money and the clout and they're thugs.
Yeah.
You know, when, I won't say who, but when one of the chief people for Senate Intelligence Committee reached out to me about 3 years ago and said, Dr. Greer, will you come up here? And I went into the SCIF. A SCIF is a secure compartmented information facility. Yeah. Because we can't get anything on this subject. This was the top, working with the chairs, Senate Intelligence and Armed Services. His portfolio included overseeing the NSA, CIA, NRO, 3-letter agencies. And I said, yeah, I can. I'll come in. I'll give you everything we got. Once he started looking into this, he had 2 Black Hawk choppers unmarked over his house that next day and just hovering, looking down, threatening him with his 4 kids in the house. So he called. I said, John, I told you these are thugs.
Yeah.
These are thugs.
We not only have they tried to kill you, but you've also been offered quite a bit of money to stand down too, right?
Yeah, very funny story. There was a character named General Albert Stubblebine III. He had been head of Army Intelligence Special Forces, and he was part of this group as he allegedly was retired. He wasn't. And when I started first moving on this issue, particularly when we started a team to go out and try to track and make contact with these objects, which we successfully did in the spring of 1992, he surfaced and offered me, and this is a legitimate offer, in 92, $2 billion.
With a B.
With a B, if I would be quiet and be part of his team. And he had a board seat for me to be on. This is how it's done. So they either blackmail you, or they create false narratives about you, defame you, or they buy you off, or all 3. So I've had all 3 of those ops run on me. Yeah. And I've just said, go jump in the lake.
Yeah.
He went behind my back to my wife, tried to convince her to convince me. And I said, don't you ever talk to her again. But she's the angel in all this. This month we have our 45th wedding anniversary.
I'm sure she's been through a lot with this.
She's been through hell. Yeah.
She could have took the $1 billion and went $2 billion.
Yeah. But I mean, we care about the future of this country and the world and humanity, right? And the planet. Yeah. And it's going to hell in a handbasket quickly. Yeah. I mean, this country and the world is on a downward death spiral unless we get this right. And the linchpin to solving the most intractable problems. Because young people think, oh, there's no solution to the environment. There is. There's no solution to poverty. There is. And we have it. But it would disrupt. This is like the ultimately disruptive technology. It would Schmidt can and put into the garbage can $1 trillion worth of a multi-trillion, $100,000 trillion worth of assets. Now, to the people who are alarm bells going off on Wall Street, remember, a transition like that's going to take 15 or 20 years.
Right.
Let's be a simple math here. There are 1.5 billion motor vehicles on the road globally. We create about 100 million cars and trucks a year. If you retooled every factory on planet Earth to this 0 point type energy transmission system, that would take 15 years. Right. And that is if you just instantly, like bewitched, wiggled your nose and it all got, retooled. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
So even if it came out today and you extrapolate 20 years from now into 2044, we scarcely have time for that.
Yeah.
We just don't. So one of the problems is we're running out of time to fix these huge intractable problems. And long before any problems with the environment will get us, the geopolitical situation is going to get us. Why? Because you have the haves and the have-nots. The extremes of wealth and poverty are getting worse and worse, which then radicalizes these poor countries in the Middle East, Africa, all over the world. And you're not going to fix that with fossil fuel transmission lines.
No.
So this would also solve that globally. If you have any humanitarian care about the children of God, humans, you would want to have something that would be able to advance our civilization. And so, but the people who have come across this technology, independent of studying an extraterrestrial spacecraft, like Nikola Tesla and others, Floyd Sweet, who had he's in our movie, The Lost Century. He had a thing a little bigger than a cigarette pack that,
This guy Scrappy?
yeah, and it was running a 300 horsepower electric motor.
Yeah.
And he was in talks with General Motors about it, and they killed him. He was flat out killed. So, all these solutions have come and gone for 100 years. This is why I call this a lost century of human evolution and progress due to the fascist, totalitarian, power-hungry nuts that are not just U.S., it's a global problem.
They're also doing something called black shelving, right? So as soon as someone comes out with technology, they either confiscate it or they buy it and then they hide it.
Yeah, I know a man personally that had that done. Basically, he had put all his life savings into getting the technology to a certain point. He was offered, he didn't disclose how much, but let's just say Colonel Beard and I compared notes. One day he didn't have a pot to pee in, and the next thing he was driving a Lamborghini and in Armani suits, right?
Yeah.
So, and that technology was bought up by a corporation and then put on a black shelf, meaning it was basically hidden from the public.
Right.
So now, on the other hand, I have Dr. Tom Vallone, who's one of our whistleblowers. His testimony's in our archive. He worked for the U.S. Patent Office right here in Washington, and he saw these technologies being marked as national security threats and moved out, and the patents denied, but also what are called national security orders slapped on them to confiscate them.
So yeah, I kind of gathered anything in the patent office that has to do with energy has a different process to seek a patent. So they're going to be reviewed, and if it's anything that's advanced energy technology, they're going to either seize it, confiscate it, or black shelf it.
And this brings up another question, because in our democracy, which is based on a capitalism, but also allegedly free market, right? The whole Adam Smith. We don't have a free market.
No.
Tell me, how do you have a free market if the most important scientific technological breakthroughs in human history are ruthlessly suppressed and kept out of the market? You don't have a free market. You have a managed market, which is kind of what communist China has, right? So it's sort of a global totalitarian market where anything that begins to surface that upsets that status quo gets cut off at the knees. And can we prove this? We can absolutely prove it in a court of law.
So let's get to so I talked about the they, right? And the two separate governments, they have to function with some type of financial. So, I come from the special operations community. I've been part of SAP programs. Don't know that's a special access programs. A lot of those programs are funded by black funds. But when people say black funds, they have oversight, presidential oversight for these secret programs. Where you're talking about something totally off the books, black funds that is illegal, unconstitutional. And to where the president doesn't even have oversight over it, the CIA directors, DIA directors, Pentagon doesn't know. And a lot of that money gets over there because of accounting errors, right? Overselling products.
Well, sure. I mean, Donald Rumsfeld himself, the day before 9/11, we have the videotape, said there are 2.3 trillion with a T dollars unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budget. It's now estimated that number is way north of 8 trillion. And where has it gone? All right. So I know where it's gone. It's gone to my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman. It's gone to Lockheed. It's gone offshore. It's gone to fund wet works and assassinations and criminal organizations. It's gone to bolster up the global drug trade. In fact, we know that these man-made UFOs are used in shipping not only humans, but drugs. So, and that's a nasty bit of work right there. So I was talking to someone associated with law enforcement, federal, recently about this. I said, give me the federal penal law book, and almost everything in there, this organization is violating. So why don't you go after them?
Right.
What the heck are you here for?
Well, the programs and funding itself is unconstitutional, correct?
Yes, it is. And here's why. The black budget, like the Gang of Eight in Congress, the top Senate and House intel and armed services people, there's select people who will know the specifics of that black budget.
Okay.
And the president's people.
Now, you're talking about the official black budget.
The official black budget.
Yeah.
You know, and those are things not published. Public doesn't know. Most congressmen don't know. They just nod and say, okay.
Right.
But then there's this other, I call it deep black or illegal black budget. And that is what we're talking about.
Right.
And it's a much bigger number than the official black budget. The legal black budget is much smaller than this other one.
So these are people inside of our government, military folks, government folks, contractors that are operating this fund. And I've heard you say it's been going for 70 years.
At least. Yeah.
So if it's been going on that long, it's multi-generational, what's the buy-in to get somebody like young captain in the Army to say, okay, I want to be part of this too?
Actually, it happens usually more subtly than what happened to me. They tried to buy me in with $2 billion and then threats. And, you know, I was almost killed back then on an incident that happened. But most people, they'll see if they have a familial lineage or if their psychological profile fits a very specific criteria. And that is that they are very intelligent, but they are fundamentally sociopaths, and that they're sociopathic enough that they will be happy to break the law, and if they can get, and then they'll give them a little task, and then a little more, and then a little more. Unless you're a legacy person, like George H.W. Bush, right, or someone who came up another way through corporate. So in the government sphere, it's done that way. In the corporate world, it's a little bit different, but a similar process. Because I'm right now communicating with the former chairman of a Fortune 50 company who wants to defect and come forward. Now, as soon as he reached out to me, he was threatened to have he and his children and grandchildren killed.
Right.
His whole family wiped out. So we're putting him under federal protection. But he's holding the Holy Grail. He's got the documents. And he said, for decades, the whole world could have had, quote unquote, free energy. And it's a crying shame. But, you know, this guy's pushing 80. He's going to meet his maker. And he deeply regrets this, right? And so there are men and women like that. And one thing I want to say to anyone listening, we need you guys to come forward. And it used to be we did this naked, had no protection. Everything I've done for 34 years until June 20th, we had no protection. Now there is a special access project that's just been authorized beginning June 20th of 2024 that will provide the protection, surveillance, and protection for any whistleblowers or high-value witnesses who want to come forward.
I was going to bring this up. It's very important that you were part of getting this legislation or whatever passed, and so people do have protection. So if anybody listening has seen something, participated in something,
you need to contact us like yesterday. There's some things moving very quickly right now. The least of it is what's going on in Congress, actually.
Yeah.
What's really important, now that I'll pivot to this right now, a year and a half ago, a man contacted me who's a very senior special forces person. And he had been given the mandate to put together a team to bring these illegal programs under control. And he's working with someone who's been asked to look into this. And similar to the Senate Intelligence Committee, they didn't have any information on it because they're in the legal side of the military and U.S. federal law enforcement, just like the congressmen and senators are not read in. They're not. Read in means briefed. And so I'm sitting on all this evidence. It's the mother lode. It's absolutely the mother lode of intel. It's the largest intelligence collection in the world on this subject, period. Much more than what the Senate Intelligence Committee has access to, or the White House. So I said, look, I'll put this together for you. We spent $500,000 and 2 years digitizing all this stuff. And now it's there for the public to see, go see it. You question what I'm saying? Spend the time to go. It'll take you 2 years to get through the archive, but it's all out there. So what this man said was, you know, we're not being allowed to know anything, and we're tired of being the have-nots.
Right.
So they're very senior military, intel, law enforcement. We know something's going on here. There's smoke, there's fire, but we have no access, even with their clearances, top secret, compartmentalized, blah, blah. TSSCI, top secret special compartmented information. And so I said, well, look, I'll give you everything I have, but we're still in the process of organizing it and digitizing it. But now that team is rolling, and they're now have a part of it that can provide this, I can't say what agency, can protect these whistleblowers. And so the reason that's a game changer, people need to hear specific examples to make this real. Mm-hmm. So last year, before our National Press Club event, there was a man who surfaced who had been on a retrieval team out of the Northern Nevada Test Range, north of Nellis Air Force Base. And it was a special operations situation, and it was he was based at a helo pad up there. And initially, he was tasked with retrieving the malfunctioning man-made UFOs that crashed. The ones he was involved with at that point were the triangular Raytheon or Northrop Grumman anti-gravity platforms that you see floating around. Then he was read into on a task where they downed or stunned an extraterrestrial vehicle that came down, but it didn't crash. It sort of soft landed out there. And there's a lot of his whole case is in the archive. Anyone can see it. Now, his name is redacted, and here's why. He was going to come up here and testify to the Pentagon and to the Senate Intelligence Committee people and Armed Services last year, and we were just about to get his ticket. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we need funding support. We fund all this.
Right.
And I'm a retired doctor, not a billionaire. And, I'm comfortable, but I'm not, and we were just about to get the ticket, and a van shows up out front of his house in the upper Midwest. And out come these guys. They said, look at your phone. He looks at his phone. And go look at your computers. And they had embedded child pornography on all his devices. And they said, you take one more step towards this, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison, and you're never going to see your two young children again. Now, see, if that were to happen today, mm-hmm. we would have surveillance on that, and we would know who did it, and they're going to get arrested and prosecuted. And if we find that they've engaged in treasonous behavior, executed. So, I'm sick of this. I'm telling you, I'm about to break my leash, and that ain't going to be pretty because I'm holding a lot of information. But this witness intimidation, me putting together these witnesses has been very difficult because I've done it as a private citizen with virtually no funding and no protection from the federal government. I can show you in my archive in 1994 or 5 where I asked Bill Clinton to do an executive order for this. And this is what Trump or Harris need to do, whoever wins, and make it even stronger. And I'm going to say that publicly for the first time, they need to do a couple executive orders, and I can help craft them because they wouldn't even know how to write it properly, to be honest with you. Neither does the Senate. So the thing is that this guy, we would catch those people red-handed now. So what I tell people is everything changed about a month and a half ago. And so there's a big opportunity now for an avalanche of whistleblowers to come forward who have information. And I would really ask people to come forward at this point.
So two things you said. One is funding, and the other is whistleblowers coming forward. So where could people go to, one, get behind you financially and mm-hmm. support this? Because you like it's private funded for a reason, by the way. Yep. For a very important reason, it's privately funded. And two, people that do want to be whistleblowers, where can they go?
Yeah, they can all go to our website, drstephengreer.com, and to the archive. We have a crowdfunding right now for the Intelligence Archive, mm-hmm. Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. And we have a crowdfunding. You can my assistant can get you the link. Yeah. And we've raised about $440,000 out of $1 million or so we need this year. But that also funds these witnesses. So I'll give you an example. I had a Lieutenant Colonel Air Force guy who was a U-2 spy plane pilot. And, we would pay for his driver, and he's in a wheelchair, he's a hero of the country, and bring him up here. And he met with people in the Senate and the Pentagon people. But we're funding all that. And it's out of what donations people give. So it's an humble. This whole operation is run out of a part of my living room at our house. It's a very modest operation, really.
Yeah, but making a big impact.
It's had a big impact, but I have count them one staff member. It's my wife and me and one staff member. So we do need some help.
You've chosen not to take a clearance.
I won't accept a security clearance.
Yeah, for obvious reasons, right?
Because it would be shackles, right? So the truth of the matter is, in these meetings I've had, like with General Hughes, who was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and Admiral Wilson, who was the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, J2, those were open. But it's a gentleman's agreement. Yeah. I don't share anything they ask me not to share or attribute to them. But as far as I'm concerned, everything I have, I'm willing to give free. I'm not a consultant being paid, $5,000 an hour to do this for the Pentagon or Congress. I don't care about that. If I cared about that, I would have taken the $2 billion from General Stubbleby, right? It's not my value system. But we really do have, we can prove, this is the other big thing that's happening. There's a major law firm that's looking at starting a civilian RICO, racketeering influence corrupt organization lawsuit. It'd probably be $1 trillion lawsuit over the illegal secrecy and what it's done to our country and to people. And that is something that we're actively negotiating with right now. So that's another strategy. So one strategy is the Congress and White House. One strategy is the Special Access Project, looking into this and protecting witnesses. Another strategy is the standing up of a law enforcement strike team that can hit these illegal sites and corporations and bring that the ET bodies. We have dissected bodies, craft, man-made and extraterrestrial, out. So that's all. And then there's another sort of, in a sense, bigger issue going on I want to speak to very carefully. There's a group of people out of a couple of black sites in the United States that I've been meeting with for a little over a year, who are in those illegal projects at a very operational high level. Operational high level as in managing the sites, transporting the downed ET craft and dead bodies, et cetera, and so on, who have all the evidence and are wanting to come forward. But they don't want to risk their lives and families' lives without it being done effectively and also safely. Right. So I have created a handshake between that group and the law enforcement branch of it that I'm helping sort of mentor and strategize and provide all the intelligence for. Because the reason this is important, and this is why we want more people to do this, the next big appeal I have to everyone watching who may be currently in that system, if a bona fide constitutionally appointed law enforcement group comes to your facility, put your weapon down. You don't want to be caught up on a treason charge. Now, I will tell you, most of the guys who are in their 20s to even 50s working in these places, they don't know they're part of a illegal.
I think they're doing their duty, right?
Well, it's just, yes, sir. You know how it works. Yeah. I mean, they're not read in because even if you're at Area 51, let's say, so-called, and you're at S4, which is operational where the ET materials are, right? That's where that is. And we know where it is. Poot, Mesa, and Groom Lake, S4. And I have all these on a map. You want to see the map? Go to my archive. They're marked and described. So I know a man, I was just communicating with him yesterday, who was in there. And he was read into a very narrow sliver, right?
It's compartmentalized.
Highly compartmentalized. Yeah. Everyone in the military knows about compartmentalization. But this is hyper compartmentalized and monitored for no one goes out of their lane, right? Now, what I've done is debrief over 1,000 people like that over 30 years, where I know everything all 1,000 of them know to reach the assessment that we have.
Right.
And that's something that is just about to be finished, and that are these comprehensive assessments that will stand on top of this archive for each section. Right.
Because each one of them has one slither of information. You'd speak to 1,000 of them. Now you have a bigger.
It's like making a mosaic. If you're making, and there's a 1,000 pieces in this mosaic or puzzle, and someone's got to put all those pieces together. Yeah. That's the painstaking work I've tried to do over the last 30 years.
So out of these 150 plus facilities, we hear like Area 51, but what actually happens at these facilities?
Well, they're, again, highly compartmented. You have conventional operations, right, which are normal, as my people inside the deep covert programs call it, Team Blue, the regular military. And then these other projects are completely sequestered and access is differently controlled. And they're in even different areas of a base. So let's take Edwards Air Force Base. Edwards has a facility and a couple facilities attached to it that I've known about since the 90s related to the aerospace industry where they test our man-made UFOs. And Edwards has conventional operations. So you may be based out of Edwards and know about the conventional operations. These others you would have no knowledge of. Moreover, access is very restricted, and it's based on you being cleared, but also most of the relevant places are underground. So I always tell people anything really important on this subject is either in space or it's underground. It is not sitting in a building above ground.
So at these facilities, you see this is where you see a lot of craft flying. So you see like the Tic Tac and
that was ours. Tic Tac was our. We have a witnesses and an artist drawing of one from 1967 from Pennsylvania. That Tic Tac.
These things go like 200,000 miles an hour and then take a right turn.
Correct.
Like how's it?
You want to know how the physics? Elegant. Let me do it in lay terms.
Okay.
Imagine creating an electromagnetic field.
Okay.
Around an object. So it basically becomes essentially massless, not just weightless, massless. Because weight has to do with the gravity, but mass, you can be out in space, right?
Sure.
Where there's no gravity and there's still the mass of an object. But imagine having the physics of that worked out where you can move an object and you're adjusting for 1 gravity, all right? But it's in a bubble. It's sort of in a space-time bubble electromagnetically. So it can be moving at 200,000 miles per hour, no sonic boom, because it actually is slicing through the air without the clap that you'd have with a sonic boom from going faster than the speed of sound. But also it means that you could make a right-hand turn or go straight up and down at huge velocities. That in a normal aircraft, literally your brains would come out of your nose. I mean, you would be killed.
Yeah.
The G-forces would frickin' kill you, right?
Right.
Not this. This technology allows for 1G and you're moving around. And what's the date where we mastered gravity control? I have a man who is the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs here in Washington. It's the largest Department of Defense lab. It's here in Southwest Washington. I've been there, been in the facilities. And he had been in the vault and he found the documents that stated October 1954, the year before I was born, is the date that we mastered gravity control, what I'm describing. So keep in mind that we have had man-made UFOs operational since the mid to late 50s.
This tells me NASA's not involved.
There is a compartmented operation in NASA that interfaces with these other agencies, but it's also being run criminally.
Because, I mean, clearly the space shuttle and those, and from that is outdated.
Yeah. Oh, well, but ironically, my uncle's, when he worked on the lunar module, that landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong, that was rockets and jet thrusters in the Apollo mission, right?
Right.
By the time that Roman candle went up, we didn't need it.
Right.
But see, he worked on the conventional end of it, right? And there was a contractor. So he was Grumman, became Northrop Grumman, and it was part of the whole Apollo mission. Because the U.S. government doesn't build anything, corporations build things.
Right.
But these corporations have highly compartmented operations that are working on these technologies, and we can prove that.
Right.
And we have whistleblowers from in those systems, and now we can tell the law enforcement and military where these black sites are.
Yeah.
Now, lethal force is used at these places, and the other big problem. Think about this: your kit. You were involved in operations, and imagine everything you were ever told about that you had technologically. And you're told to go take this site that has technologies that are several thousand years more advanced than everything the legal blue team, let's call it Team Blue for the military, have. How do you do that? This is a big problem.
Yeah.
So my job is to find people in those systems who know what their Achilles heels are, where the soft belly is, and then what the technologies are that have to be brought forward. Now, I know what they are, and they can be requisitioned by the conventional military and law enforcement, but it'd be very controversial. But you can hit a facility and take down their entire power grid and then go in.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to talk about more than that, but I'm just saying this is some of the stuff I have to deal with every day with a team that wants to save the country and do this. They're very heroic, and they all realize they could be killed, as we all do. Yeah. But and you've been in that situation. Yeah. But these are very smart people on the right side of this, who I hope will go the distance, because this is these initiatives I think are going to supersede Congress, because Congress has been dragging its feet, and I've been dealing with members of Congress since the 90s, and various presidents, White Houses, and this. At a certain point, someone's going to have to say, "Let's roll." Someone's going to have to say, "We've reached a conclusion. This is real, and it is an existential threat to the United States. It is criminal and treasonous, and we're going to fix it." But you're going up. It's a David and Goliath story. I don't care if you threw the whole capabilities of the legal, military, FBI, law enforcement of the United States at these guys. They're sitting on technologies. You go in with a helo, right, a chopper, and they have what's called an ARV, an alien reproduction vehicle, that can go 200,000 miles per hour and go from point to point, almost like a teleport, right? Is it with a game, set, match?
Not even close.
I'm telling you, the end of the briefing I had with Admiral Tom Wilson, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, when I briefed him in 1997, 27 years ago. And at the end of the meeting, I said, "Look, we need your help." I'm working full-time as an emergency doctor, shuttling up here from North Carolina, where I lived then. I live now in Virginia. And he says, from what I've learned, A, he was threatened for inquiring about it. B, he was told he would be demoted and taken a star off his lapel if he pursued it any further. And then C, when he realized these technologies were real and were in the hands of a group of sociopathic humans that are in corporate, military, government, sort of this, it's a hybrid entity operating. You can't, if you go at it from the governmental point of view, it's corporate. If you go at it from a corporate point of view, it's government, top secret. They're very, very clever in how they sealed themselves off. But he says, look, it's point, set, match, because the best thing I have is a B-2 stealth, and they have these things that can do circles around it. I'm quoting. This is from the head of Intelligence Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Wilson. So I said, yes, but there are workarounds. But see, now, the difference between 97 and now, there are a group of courageous, and I'm inviting more to come forward, men who are going to go, well, no. Look, the United States, we're sitting here in Washington, and Washington Monument's over there. A ragtag bunch of people, Washington, a few people, going up against the British Empire. The empire on which the sun never set, right? And unfunded, ragtag group of people, and they founded something called the United States of America. So don't tell me that we can't do this. We can do it. Is it going to be easy? No. Is it dangerous? Yes. But are the benefits to the country? Right. And we'd have a whole new economy. Right. We would eliminate poverty globally. It would be the ship, the tide that lifts all ships. But it would also solve these intractable problems. The reason our kids are so depressed is that they don't see a future. They tell global warming or pollution, the oceans are dying and all this. And there's this gloom and doom. So I view all this as a message of great hope. But you have to cross this chasm of covert stuff to do it. And so you have to, for me, it's sort of been a spiritual journey to be able to keep the hope.
Well, Dr. Greer, we're going to take a quick break
Sure.
And then come back and talk about what I know everyone wants to hear. And I got a lot of questions on too, is the UFOs and extraterrestrials.
Sure. So. Absolutely.
Hey guys, 10 years ago, I had found myself in a position to where investing in Mighty Oaks and all the different things I'm involved in, I had found myself not prepared for retirement. And I went to my friend Ryan Wheelis at Allied Wealth. He had been a longtime supporter of Mighty Oaks Foundation. From the beginning, he's one of our first donors to Mighty Oaks, has been a friend for a long time, and I really trusted him. And he has helped me build my retirement and invest in my future through his company, Allied Wealth. He's one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to wealth management, and has taken money that I had stuck away in 401ks that was not really producing and made it produced tenfold. And I'm so happy with the results for me that I asked him to partner with this show, and he is a partner of this show now. And we want to not only let you guys know about Allied Wealth, but we're going to be doing some special episodes on wealth management management with Ryan, helping co-host them. I say co-host. I'm going to be asking him questions and we're going to be providing you information on how to best manage your wealth. So if you're like me and you need someone to help you with your retirement, with your investments, with just your overall wealth management, go to alliedwealth.com and meet Ryan and his team to get you set up. All right, Dr. Greer. So I want to talk about UFOs, extraterrestrials, but before I do, I had one more question on, if I'm correct, you've released actual top secret information to public before. Mm-hmm. And how do you get away with that?
That's a great question. Yeah. In 1997, mm-hmm. and I don't know if you know this, it's done in the military. It's called a unless otherwise directed letter, mm-hmm. UNOD, and it's a technique where basically you say, here's our assessment, mm-hmm. and here's what we're going to do unless otherwise directed. So having been through the whole system by 1997, this would have been in the fall. And I discovered the president and the CIA director and members of Congress and all these muckety-mucks, including, the head of intelligence for Joint Chiefs of Staff, had been denied information and actually threatened. We reached the conclusion 27 years ago, actually before then, by 93. But by 97, we could prove, if it went to court, that the projects were being run illegally and therefore were unconstitutional and criminal projects.
Not really even classified.
And once we did that, here's what I said. We're stripping them of all their security clearances as of now. So there are no National Security Act provisions that will protect a criminal enterprise, right? If it's not overseen properly according to the rule of law and the Constitution, and they're on the other side of the law, they can't then claim and use the law to threaten people. So I said, we're going to release all military witnesses from their non-disclosure agreements and their national security oaths. We're going to release all government documents we get, even if they have not been declassified and do not have a declassification stamp, including top secret ones, and release them to the public. And unless otherwise directed within 60 days, we will begin that process. That was the beginning of the Public Disclosure Project in 1998, 60 days later. And that's the history. And I can prove it. It's in the archive. Go there and look up unless otherwise directed letter. And it went to every agency, return receipt requested. To this day, no one has ever contacted me in writing or on the phone and said, Dr. Greer, that's not a correct assessment. Because they can't. And if they were to try to enforce the law, now on most national security issues, yes, you need to obey the law. But when they're abusing the National Security Act to run a criminal enterprise. Mm-hmm. Let's put it very simply. And so at that point, you call them out and say, this is nonsense. So this is where I turn to my law enforcement and FBI and other federal enforcement agencies and go, what are you waiting for? I mean, this is something much more dangerous than the mafia ever was before you infiltrated and took them down. You need to stand up an operation to do it on this group. And, too bad. Booz Allen Hamilton, you guys who have the compartmented operations dealing with that around here and operations that you manage for NSA and elsewhere, this is all on the radar now of U.S. federal law enforcement. And but the birth of this was 27 years ago where I came to that conclusion. And so one person one time threatened me who was I said, come put on the handcuffs. My first call back then, I said, will be to Ted Koppel, who I knew for ABC Nightline. I said, because you're absolutely breaking the law. And I can prove it. If this goes to a court case, it'll blow the lid off this. It would make my day, because this will go to court. You're going to prosecute me over this. I will bring in the proof. And guess who's going to be subpoenaed to appear as my evidence on my side? Former presidents, current presidents, directors of the CIA, generals and admirals I briefed, all 762 of my whistleblowers. You want that to be the case of the millennium. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That's what I said to this guy. He said, oh, you're crazy like a fox. I said, yeah, because we've boxed you in. But now what the problem is with Congress, this stuff is like at the postdoc level I'm telling you on this show.
Right.
But the people who are staffers on Capitol Hill and in the White House, they're in first grade still. And they don't have a concentrated investigatory, and it's not necessarily their fault. I mean, I was just talking to Congressman Burchett about this a couple months ago. They wanted to get a select committee with subpoena power to do this, and it was denied. And we know who did it. There were two people in the House, the two Mikes, Mike Rogers and Mike Turner of Armed Services and House Intelligence, that killed that bill. And they killed the Senate bill that would have given amnesty or safe harbor to these executives and whistleblowers coming forward, so that they would have 6 months to come forward and they wouldn't be prosecuted under RICO or at risk legally. And that was gutted. So there are some people in the system who are, I mean, that was overwhelmingly passed, by the way, by the Senate. And it was unanimously passed out of the Senate Intelligence Committee the week after we did our National Press Club event right here in D.C. last year, a year ago. So one of my concerns is that if this is the game that's going to be played, where there are some embedded devils inside the political establishment stopping these things, then I think it's time to roll with law enforcement.
Okay, here's the big question. If I was president of the United States tomorrow, the first thing I'd want to know, where are the aliens? I want to see them, and I would be denied that right. And we know that. Tell me as president, I wouldn't get access to that. So I'm asking you.
Here's what will happen. I know what happens. I know what happened to Mr. Trump and also to Mr. Reagan.
Because they asked, right?
They all ask.
Yeah.
Anybody with a thinking brain asks about this.
Where are the aliens?
I mean, everyone does.
Yeah.
They're either told nothing, or they're provided very carefully curated disinformation. Well, what do I mean by that? I mentioned a little while ago that we have proof and evidence that these all this conspiracy about the aliens abducting people and mutilations, that's being done by human black projects using reverse engineered ET technologies. But what they'll do, I mean, let's say you're a real estate developer, like Mr. Trump or whoever, governor of Lower Schlabolia, and you come into the White House. You have no knowledge of this. There's no independent group. We're trying to be that group that will be a check and balance on this corruption. But you're going to ask through the system. The system's either going to come back, none of this exists, it's not true. Okay, it's all a myth. Or if they think they can manipulate you, which is what they did to Mr. Trump and also to Mr. Reagan, they'll bring in terrifying portfolios of information about the alien threat. Now, let's not forget that Werner von Braun, who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler, warned on his deathbed in 1974, and we have this from his right-hand assistant at the time, Carol Rosin, that they were going to stage a threat from outer space to try to seize global power over sort of a totalitarian global control that's not based on freedom or peace, but based on endless war. But to get there, they have to first convince the propaganda to the public. This is why 99% of everything on this subject that you Google is just nonsense and rubbish, in my opinion. And if you're the president and they think they can manipulate you in a direction they want you to go in Reagan's case, it was Star Wars, SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative. And I know he's passed away, Colonel Holman, Holman, was on the committee selling that to the president. First, they tried to pitch it to Carter. Carter wouldn't bite. Then they went to Reagan. Reagan got convinced that the UFOs and ETs were real, but we needed to fight them. And so he took the bait. I know that Mr. Pence and also Mr. Trump in the first term he had were provided a lot of false information on this. I know for a fact. I'm not going to say how I know, but I know for a fact. And so the question is, whatever is the president, they need to rely on, I don't have an axe to grind. I'm not trying to do this to get position, power, money. I'm doing it for the truth. We have the truth. We have the evidence and the facts. They need to rely on an outside advisor, right? Which I've offered to be and have been. But ultimately, if you're the president, you're going to be gaslit or deceived. Usually you're not told much anything.
Right.
But if you think that you can manipulate you into doing something like put more funding into something and for this whole cabal, like, let's put more money into the defense contractors siphoning things off to develop technologies to shoot down extraterrestrial vehicles, then they will give you information convincing you they're a threat. Now, keep in mind, we can document 122 cases where we have attacked ET vehicles and downed them. If you're civilizations, and there are multiple of them.
Wait, I want to clarify what you said. Humans have attacked ET vehicles and downed them intentionally.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Using electromagnetic pulse and scalar weapons.
Why would we?
Because the people running that program want to figure out how those technologies work so they can have them. It's a technology acquisition effort, period.
So EMP could down these vehicles.
Oh, yeah. And they're portable. I've seen them. They're this big. They're illegal. Right. I mean, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty forbids anyone having an EMP weapon, but we have them.
So when we crash these vehicles, we're crashing them like they crash and live, or is it killing the occupants?
Both. Some survive, some don't. I know men who've transported both, living and dead. And, we know where they are. Some are still living and they're called extraterrestrial refugees that are in some of these underground bases.
I want to just pause because you've answered this 100 times, but I just want to be like super clear. ETs, aliens exist. We've seen them.
I think aliens are from Guatemala. I don't use that word. I use EBENs.
Okay.
Extraterrestrial biological entities. Yeah. Yeah. And they have bodies and, they're different looking, but, there are a whole bunch of different species.
That's what I was going to ask is multiple species?
Dozens. At least 5-6 dozen different civilizations. None of them are hostile. Look, if you had that kind of technology and you come across a country, a nation, or world like Earth that's beginning to develop thermonuclear weapons in the 40s and 50s, and if you really wanted to just sit those kids down, you would sit them down and it'd be over because you're like 100,000 to 1 million years technologically more advanced than we are. So now, it doesn't mean that they're happy with us, and it doesn't mean that they're not concerned about our hostility, because the other part of this story we haven't gotten to is that we have become an existential threat to worlds out there. Now, people are going to say, what is he talking about? Let me say this. 80 years of reverse engineering studying advanced extraterrestrial technologies from non-human intelligence, with trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars going into it. And I might add that scientists with the highest IQs I have ever met on Earth are not at MIT and Harvard. They're working on these projects in a skiff or an underground base. Brilliant.
Reverse engineering
the ET crap, and then applying it to practical, covert applications for this organization. Not benefiting humanity usually. Some of it's come out. Sure. Most of it hasn't. So that's what you're doing. So there's been this technology curve that's gone nonlinear for straight up from the 40s to now, and it continues to go straight up. The problem with it is that we're reaching parity where Raytheon and Lockheed Skunk Works and Northrop Grumman and some of these other outfits with this organization globally have craft that would reach almost parity level. But it also means that because we have these quantum potential weapons that are scalar, in other words, they're going beyond the speed of light, we're a threat to other worlds. So at what point, and this is scary right here, a little bit scary, at what point do they push back or do they say enough? Now, I've been told that we're within 2 to 10 years of that. And that is the largest threat ever, because right now they've been very patient, like parents with a child, right? With some teenage boy running around doing crazy stuff like I did growing up in the South, poor, and I was hell on wheels when I was young. And I'm no picnic now. Go ask my wife. But the truth is that, they've been incredibly restrained. Let me just put it that way. The restraint the ETs have shown is phenomenal. And they're not hostile. But at the same time, they're not going to let this planet's super elite, criminal elite, become a threat out there. And that's where we're pushing.
Have we communicated with them? And I don't just mean communicating like...
We have.
I mean like verbally or through intelligent communication.
Yes, we have. And also there's a man on my team who monitored those kind of communications out of the S4 area of Area 51, Nellis. That intercepted some of the same issues. And we have a man who was at the communications center that's underground at Eglin Air Force Base a few years ago who received similar information. So this is, no president knows what I just said, and nor does anyone in the Congress. And they don't realize the neglect this issue has had, because remember, the CIA had a guy who was a psychological warfare gentleman who broke out of the CIA and started a paper known as the National Enquirer. Why? Because that's where it was tabloid trash. This is why you say UFO people giggle. This was done deliberately because the issue is so grave and so serious. Let's mock it. I have a CIA document that has been officially declassified that names Disney Studios for doing cartoons and engaging Disney, like OSS did in World War II. But the CIA did to make cartoons and movies about ETs in a way that would be diminishing or ridiculing or mocking it.
It's a misinformation campaign.
Yeah, so it's a PSYOP, psychological warfare operation for propaganda purposes. And it's been very effective.
We touched on Project Mockingbird, but can you tell the audience about Project Mockingbird? And
well, Mockingbird and one's related to it. That's an old term. I have a document from 1991 or 2 in the Papa Bush administration where it's CIA, and we officially obtained it, where it talks about the CIA having people in all the world's media to change, stop, alter stories that we want to, and that it's very effective, and that they have basically knocks, a non-official cover. So you have someone who is ostensibly the national security editor at CNN, but they're actually backdoor payroll off the agency, CIA.
Right.
So that's a fact. And I know who some of those are. And some of them, it would shock you. You'd never guess in a million years. But it's a dirty business. But yes, they can control that. And if you control the big mainstream media, they're not killing your show. But, I was on a show named Joe Rogan. There's a guy named Joe Rogan. Mm-hmm. For him to get that $100 million from Spotify, he had to take my show out of the lineup, out of the archive. Yeah. So when you talk about big money, and everyone has a price, let me just put it that way. We were talking about a gentleman before, I won't name, who's a friend of yours, that has gotten waved off because of what we're doing. It's the tip of the spear of fixing this problem. And there were serious threats conveyed to our mutual friend, who I will remain nameless. But I think this is a real problem. And so the big question always is for this group, what is that guy's price? What threat or what inducements do we have to do to stand that person down, right? And that works whether you're a politician or a media person. So the media is totally corrupted and controlled. I'll give you want a really good example. I can talk about this because the guy's passed away. In 1990s, I was at a group in New York City with a bunch of highfalutin, very wealthy socialites, and UN Secretary General, his wife was there, and Rockefellers were there. And a man named Bob Schwartz, who had been on the board of Time Life.
Okay.
Big media guy, was very good friends with a guy named Mike Wallace, who used to be on 60 Minutes, CBS 60 Minutes, who was their star investigative reporter. Mike Wallace came across some documents and information on this issue and was going to do an expose and blow it wide open. And at that time, Westinghouse, which is a defense contractor also, owned CBS. And from way up top, he was ordered, "You're not going to do this story." And he said, "Well, yeah, I am." They said, "No, you're not." And of course, no one had ever told him he couldn't do an investigation on something corrupt or whatever. He couldn't do this story, and he went into a deep depression about it, almost suicidal. And I know I know many media people who have gotten close to that, thinking, "Oh, this is the biggest story ever." And they run into this buzzsaw and are cut off at the knees. Mm-hmm. So this is the other problem. We're supposed to be in a democracy and freedom. What this Bob Schwartz said, this Time Life board member said, "The Fourth Estate is dead. We do not have a free press." Right to my face. This is a liberal Democrat in New York, by the way. And he said, there is no free press. We're scribes taking dictation from the right hand of the king. That's what he said. We're just taking dictation from the right hand of the king. And we were talking about his whole media, the media elites of the United States. Now, that was in 1994 4 or 5, something like that, 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're running short on time, and I want to get to 2 more things. For those who don't know, the military-industrial complexes, this is where companies, where people and companies profit from the manufacturing of government weapons and technology. And what we'll read is 70 years ago, in 1961, President Eisenhower warned about the dangers of a military-industrial complex. And look at where we are today, and his fears couldn't have been more valid. This black money we're talking about, the off-the-books black money, is going to the military-industrial complex to manufacture secret aircraft and that are identified often as UAPs, UFOs, and misidentified as that. But
that's why they like that vague term.
And that's why they created it, right?
Yeah, they created it so it'd be obfuscating. But
these companies are, I'm gonna name some, and you can tell me if I'm wrong: Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Skunk Works, GE, Boeing. Am I missing any? Or did I?
Oh, there are a whole bunch more. Yeah. I mean, you have EG&G, which is a big. One of the G's is Greer, but it's no relation to me. EG&G. You have, over historically, you had Bell Labs involved in this. The things that have come out to the public from that reverse engineering have to do with things like, and Colonel Corso said this, and he managed some of those programs as an Army colonel. Before he died, he wrote a book called The Day After Roswell, I believe. I knew him and his son, but he said you have things like fiber optics and integrated circuits that were potentiated by studying extraterrestrial materials.
Right.
So there are things in our society we're using today. As a doctor, fiber optics, you use all these.
Yeah.
But the really core of the technologies dealing with energy and propulsion, those have been kept secret because that would make a run at the wealth center and the global control of the banking and oil and petrodollar system, which is the $1,000 trillion gorilla we're talking about here. So who's going to take that on, right? You're going to take on JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs and BlackRock and all the investment funds and almost all of Wall Street and all these big industrial behemoths and the commodities trading that's in the trillions of dollars a year on the Chicago Board of Trade dealing with these commodities. Because you don't need the commodities anymore. You're not going to be trading them. You know what we use oil for? Plastics. That's it. Yeah. That's all we need oil
money
for.
There.
Yep.
When you're talking about the triangle, like, I think there was one event in Arizona where but the governor was a witness and 10,000 people was a witness.
Yeah, I was there.
So it's these are clearly these things exist, but these aren't alien aircraft. These are
that would have been a Grumman or Raytheon. Most of the triangular ones are Lockheed. Or Northrop Grumman or Raytheon. But that event, there were 2 events.
Okay.
The first event very likely was extraterrestrial. The cover-up event that they piggybacked on top of it was us.
Okay.
So remember, when an event happens that they can't control, they will set up the stagecraft, it's called, to launch some deceptive operation, a false flag. A deceptive indication and warning is the proper term at the Pentagon, or a false INO is what the pop culture calls a false flag operation. So they have done many, many false flag operations over the years, sometimes just to see what public response would be, like all the triangles seen in the Hudson Valley back in the 80s. Other times to cover up something else they're doing and make people think it's aliens when it's them, right? So that's why you'll see with these cattle mutilations and abductions, you'll see these weird craft there and these weird robotic-looking aliens. They're all man-made, by the way. I know who makes them, how they make them. And they're doing these things, but you'll see there are human special operators that are running the man-made UFO and these fake aliens. And that's how it is. Now this, what I just said, most people go, what?
Is that just R&D, like research and development, or is it what reason would the government contract Lockheed Martin to build something like this and use? Is just R&D or?
Well, no. If you're going to have a war, if you're going to control the public through war instead of peace, you have to have an enemy. In order to have an enemy, you have to create the psychological propaganda so that people will believe there's an enemy.
Right.
And to give you an idea, back in the 90s when my youngest daughter was in 1st grade, one of her teachers wanted me to come in and give a talk about this. I have 4 daughters, and this is the youngest one. The very first question from a 6-year-old in North Carolina, outside of Asheville, North Carolina, was, when I started taking questions from these little kids was, well, Dr. Greer, aren't you afraid they're going to abduct you? Right? I'm going, yeah, that's not being done by the ETs. That's being done by covert. But that has so infiltrated pop culture, movies, Hollywood. Look at the movie Independence Day. It's right out of central scripting from CIA, psychological warfare operations.
Because there's a budget
Yep.
in the CIA, Pentagon, to insert certain messages in movies, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. And a lot of it's benign and just patriotic,
Sure.
right? That's okay. I don't mind that.
Of course, yeah.
But this is more diabolical.
Yeah.
And it's done more craftily than a direct thing. It's done by influencing, and all of a sudden a cutout, we call it, has the money to greenlight this script, or a script that would be based on any big filmmakers out there, this would be the biggest movie of all time, a true story on this.
Yeah.
And there are some big A-list actors who'd like to play me in it. So, give me a call. But I'll tell you, no studio will greenlight that. I had 20th Century Fox had Arnold Kupelson in the 90s. And when we were doing the briefings for Congress in 97, he sent one of his aides. And he said, this is the biggest story ever. I've got $60 million, which in 97 was a lot of money.
Sure.
For a movie. It's not a lot now, but, and I can do any movie I want. And I said, no, you won't. He says, yes, I will. I'm a $1 billion producer. I said, really? I said, okay, we'll try. So he sends his assistant, really smart lady, and goes back and says, God, this is the real X-Files. And he said, we're going to make this movie. And then 2 weeks later, Mr. Culpelson calls me up and says, Doctor, they're not going to let me do this movie. I said, I didn't think they would.
Yeah.
See, so that's another way this is controlled. What do you see on the big screen? What movies are greenlit? What books? What documentaries? How is the media covering this? The media will open the door to a disinformation agent like Luis Elizondo, who came out of the Pentagon as a counterintelligence guy to gaslight Congress on this. I know that for a fact. The top guy at the CIA, who for 50 years had been dealing with this issue, told me so. And I have an email to prove it. So, the way this works with ufologists is that a great many of them are actually carrying water for this covert group.
Sure.
And then the rest are sheeple that go along and just believe anything they say.
Yeah.
I'm getting too old to parse words, frankly, at this point. I'm 69 now, and I'm just at the point where, I don't know how much longer I'll be on this stage, but, people need to know how this system works. And Eisenhower, by the way, the reason he said, beware of the military industrial, he was a 5-star general. He was very pro-military, but he was trying to stand down this operation and bring out the technologies for peaceful purposes and make a peaceful liaison, a rapprochement with the ETs. And this group circled their limousines, and they basically started excluding him from the operations. So it was between 1956 and 1960 that this whole enterprise went off the rails. And no president since then has had control over these operations. I know that for a fact. And I also know that the Congress, except for the embedded devils they have in there representing this group, have not had oversight. So the question really becomes then, if you close off the media, and the internet now is very controlled on this. I get shadow banned all the time. My YouTube channel got totally shut down and demonetized. The Google search engines can skew things. And if you don't think so, you're living on another planet.
Of course, yeah.
So, you're really up against a big battle here, right? It's very difficult for me and for people helping me, even in the government. But the thing is, I always think what Winston Churchill said, never, never, never give up. Someone gave me a plaque with that in the darkest days of World War II, and they're being bombed by Hitler. Yeah. So I think we just have to, persevere and use our God-given brain and heart and trust to find people to do it. But Eisenhower died a very bitter man over this issue. Jackie Gleason said so, and his wife said so. And what happened is that he was totally shoved aside. And that's why Kennedy, he was going to get control over this. And as you know, I have a top secret document, CIA wiretap transcript of Marilyn Monroe threatening to hold a press conference about this because of what Kennedy had told her in Pillow Talk. And it references the objects from outer space retrieved in New Mexico in the 1940s. We're clearly referring to the Roswell and the ET crafts that were down there and shot down. And those were directional energy weapons, early ones in 47, by the way. And she had no idea. And, 2 days later, after this document, they found her dead of an apparent overdose. Now, the actor and singer Burl Ives was on my executive committee back before he passed away. He has a room in this 33rd degree Masonic temple here, right up where I have a place here in D.C. on 16th Street. He said, we all knew she was killed. We never knew why. I gave him this document. He goes, oh, my God.
Yeah.
She was going to blow the lid off of this? I said, yeah, that's what got her killed. So, and then Kennedy was going to push on this. He was going to actually dissolve the CIA. An executive order was going through. Actually, Bobby Kennedy Jr. has said that he had heard that in his family. I think he was on Larry King years ago. And of course, he got assassinated. And so there's a long history of people who try to push on this. Now, part of it is that the group that is like this, the sort of thugs, U.S. law enforcement, which has the ability, a lot of special forces guys end up working for FBI and Marshal, all kinds of, this. Those guys need to be an executive order from the president, as well as where the Congress does anything. The laws are already on the books against treason, embezzlement, felonious intimidation, abducting people, torturing people, embezzling black funds. I mean, you don't have to have a bill in Congress.
No.
You just need to enforce the darn law, right? Why don't you enforce the laws that are on the books of the United States? And if you don't, why are we claiming to live in a civilization? We're in the jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a call this is a come to kind of Jesus minute for a lot of people when they become president or a congressman. They go, well, if this is true, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there are three things that matter. I'm going to say this. What is your integrity? In other words, can you be corrupted? And what is your intelligence? Do you have the time and bandwidth to comprehend all this nuance? And the big one, do you have the courage?
Yeah.
Because, if you're going to push on this issue, you're going to go into the ultimate test of fire. And it's tough. But, those are the three requirements. The problem is amongst the elite and the political and moneyed class, right? You don't find a lot of that, which is why I love these guys who have been special forces and Green Berets and Navy SEALs and other people who work with us, because they get it. They actually have the courage of their convictions.
Yeah.
They know what's at stake. They've seen their buddies' limbs blown off for reasons much less important than this. Let's just put it that way. Endless wars being concocted in the Middle East for Bush and Cheney and whatever,
Sure.
So I think, there's the worm's starting to turn with people coming forward about that. And that's why, I hope your show is seen by a lot of folks who hear this and understand we have protection for them now.
Yeah,
and it's a whole new era. I mean, 30 years I've been asking for this, and now we have it. It's great.
Yeah, I hope people will speak up. We're out of time, but I have one thing that we can answer real quick, because
Sure.
It's probably something you don't get asked much. A lot of our audience are people of faith. I'm sure you're aware. I'm a pretty strong Christian. You talk a lot about like dimensions and realms. I'm just super curious. What's your idea of how God fits into all this in the spiritual realm and those types of things?
Oh, it very much does. I mean, the supreme being, let's call it, is Thomas Jefferson. The whole universe is, of course, created by that.
Yeah.
And I don't like the anthropocentric sort of making it like an angry man in the sky sort of thing. It's something much beyond that, beyond comprehension. And then there are all the different realms. I mean, I'm sure, I died when I was 17, got very sick, and had a near-death experience. Mm-hmm. I was raised an atheist, but then realized there is a soul, there is a God, and there is no death. It was one reason why I have the courage to do this, frankly. It was that it totally changed my life,
Yeah.
And
the
then
eternal perspective.
The eternal perspective.
Yeah.
And then I realized there were these sort of like, from the infinite power plan of the supreme being, there have to be step-down transformers. I'm using a scientific analogy. You can't plug your iPhone into a 1 billion-watt power plant. And those are these other realms and dimensions, right? At least the higher ones, whether it's angelic or the afterlife, or the divine manifestations of Godhead, like a being like Christ, you see? And those are the ones that kind of step it down and put it in to a dimension like 3D Earth. That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
And is that too simple? Maybe, but
no, I just really appreciate that because I've heard a lot of people
and
like
the ETs know that too. By the way, these extraterrestrials know that.
Well, they were created as well.
They were created too.
If they exist, they were created, right?
Now, what gets confusing, and this is what happened to Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell, they conflate. That's why I don't like the word aliens. They conflate these people from other planets with demonic things from lower dimensions.
Yeah, I've heard people like Tucker Carlson, right? He's been
totally gaslit. Tucker has totally been misinformed by this deliberate confusion between other dimensions, extraterrestrial, human, and all the man-made stuff. Right. So this gets to be where I will be blunt here. A little knowledge on this subject is an extremely dangerous thing, and people need to avail themselves of the evidence and research we have, because otherwise you need a Sherpa to guide you up to the top of that mountain, right? Or a guide through the jungle. And that's what I'm offering to do for people who can reach a lot of folks like Mr. Tucker, but also for our leaders. Yeah. Ultimately, it may be a small band of brothers and we just kind of roll together, right? Yeah. I don't know how this is going to play out. I mean, this is a dynamic thing. In the last 2 years, it's taken a lot of twists and turns, but I think if we keep the faith and here's what I think. I think we're in for a very rough ride coming up pretty fast. Right. All right. Sort of dangerous times, but we'll make it over that and it'll be a whole new civilization. Yeah. So I view the end of the world as the end of the old world and the beginning of a new one. Yeah. And it'll be like the kingdom of whatever, heaven on earth. And I believe that that is actually already possible. And it has a lot to do with not only the consciousness of this and spirituality, but combined with these wondrous and incredible technologies that would liberate the whole world. Yeah. And we would, in 20 years, imagine a world where no poverty and the world was pristine, like it was created, like perfect. That's what we're talking about. And that's possible. It's not a pipe dream. I see all the elements are here now to do it, which is what keeps me getting up in the morning every day.
Well, I'm super thankful for you doing that. We got into conversation and the gifts we're supposed to go at the beginning. And so we got some gifts for you. Smith & Wesson firearms, Vortex Optics, Gators Eyewear. We have Ally Wealth Management, it's BioPro, and BioAccelerator. Just amazing sponsors. Great. So we got a pair of Gators glasses for you. I don't know if you're familiar with Gators glasses, but Gators glasses are like ballistic glasses. Most of the guys, they've been around for 35 years. Most of the guys from the military wear these overseas. And so if you're out, out hunting extraterrestrials, you can protect your eyes.
Shoot them. Those are great. Oh, very nice.
Well, you don't shoot them. Other people.
I need to have them in a prescription version.
They actually do prescription. They do prescription lenses. Copy of my new book, A Mission Without Borders.
Oh, wonderful.
Which comes out tomorrow.
Great. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I want to read it. Great.
This is a Vortex Optics. It's an optics company. They make optics for guns and all kinds of stuff. But I got you a laser rangefinder.
Great.
Really great.
I need you to take me to a range and give me a refresher course. I need a good refresher course.
This is a really good rangefinder. And this is a BioPro. I heard your assistant said you're really into fitness.
Oh, yeah. And I work out 8 hours a week.
Well, yeah, it's BioPro's like non-synthetic like hormone therapy. It's amazing.
Great.
Kind of Eastern medicine. It's for sleep. It's really helped me in my sleep.
My assistant is one of the best Chinese acupuncture people in the world.
Really? You have to have a look into BioPro.
Thank you. I will.
And one more thing. I don't have it here, but if you would like a firearm from Smith & Wesson, we will get you a firearm from Smith & Wesson. I'll work with your assistant. We'll pick out what you want. Smith & Wesson, 170 years of America's one of the most patriotic firearm companies in the world.
They are.
We'll get you a firearm from Smith & Wesson.
Well, then my security people will have some more kit.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Greer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate your help getting the message out for us.
Yes, sir.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you, guys. Next week. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Resilient Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you hadn't already, please click subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We have so many amazing guests scheduled and you don't want to miss it.